With this introduction, let me hand over to Vivek to walk you through SKO's perspective on the contracting during the construction period. Vivek, over to
Yeah,
you.
thank you, Snehal. And Snehal will still be flipping the slides, so I'm going to give her uh, an indication when I need the slides changed.
Sure.
So we'll come back to SAFE again and the link with construction. However, I'd like to just talk a little bit about how SKA has been uh, trying to engage with the industry through the country consortia, such as the SKIC and the ILO, the Industry Liaison Officer. So there has been in process now RFI, request for information process, to understand and plan the software procurement. It's currently in progress, and India has already responded. Uh, you heard about the areas that we are most interested in. It's of course mostly around the observatory management and control software, and some of the other software like the networking and also then the pulsar area, including the low telescope hardware and electronics, right? So broadly, you can say it is of the kind of work that would come under the software procurement process. So in the SK, there would be the head of software who would be dealing with this area, as opposed to say, something like civil engineering and actual construction of the dishes and so on, which India at least is not, very significantly uh, pitching for. So the purpose of the RFI was to just understand the costs from each country and to make sure they align with the budget, to identify the skill gaps and see if there are any skills which one of the countries are signing up for and so on. And also to introduce them to the SKA process, which we'll also talk about a little later, right? And besides this, the RFI process is also uh, something that helped the India Industry Consortium and the other country consortia to get into this discussion with the industry and see what gaps are there and where industry would be interested, right? Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. So there are different ways in which SK will be engaging. And broadly speaking, there is an in-kind contribution that the country will have and an in-cash contribution. And uh, at least 70% fair work return has been assured by the SK to the countries that participate. And that could be in an in-kind or it could be in cash. And India has chosen that the maximum amount of contribution would be in kind. So if you see on the x-axis, we are actually talking about sole source contracts as well as competitive contracts. And the difference is that in some cases where there is very specific expertise which has been gathered over a long period of time, the SKA acknowledges and the council acknowledges that it is not going to be possible for competitive bidding to happen, because it would be very difficult to replicate that skill and experience. And therefore we would have to really look at we'd really have to look at going ahead with that sole source. However, that is going to be used to a very limited extent. Most of the contracting would be of a competitive nature, and if it's in kind, then the country organization, the member organization or the ministry or the consortium will be paying uh, the industry partner, and in turn the value would be credited to that country based on the rate table for the agreed upon amount of work that has been done. And if it is cash, of course, then SKO would pay the vendor directly, and the work return would depend on the value actually paid to the vendor. Uh, Next slide, please. Yeah. So this is the procurement schedule as it currently stands. So this PI 10. I'll probably need to explain the timeline. So the PI 10 would be from March, April, May. 11 would be June, July, August, and 12 would be September, October, November, roughly speaking. So you can see that the sole source tenders would probably start in about a month or so, and the contracts would be issued around a quarter later. So somewhere in the June, July, August timeframe, we could see those. The competitive market, there would be some surveys which are launched, and those would be in about the middle of this year. and after that, we would have the contracts being issued towards the end of the year, right? So this is broadly the timelines, and of course, not as you heard from Phil Diamond yesterday, not all of the contracting can be done right away because there is only a small budget which has been approved for the first 1 or 2 years, and uh, the procurement will essentially the first few contracts would match that, and in the subsequent years there would be more cycles of a similar nature. But this is what we know for 2021. Next slide. Okay, so for SKA software, right? Given what Snehal talked about safe and the collaborative nature, we want to look at skilled knowledge workers in a collaborative mode, right? And not a transactional work relationship. So the idea is that it is going to be a very close collaboration with the SKA office and with other software vendors that would be there. So
Did we lose Vivek?
and because of that, what will happen is that the
Vivek, I
SK
think
would
we
like
lost
to
you for a
see
few
that there is.
seconds.
Vivek, we lost you for about
Oh, sorry.
30 seconds.
Yeah, okay. So I will repeat this slide. So we want, in the SK, we want to have skilled knowledge workers and leverage their interest in a collaborative rather than in a transactional work relationship, which is just about throwing a specification over the wall and getting a final work product back after several months or quarters. It's going to be very collaborative, almost daily calls with other team members through the daily stand-ups in the agile, very significant reviews almost every 2 weeks through the demos and through the final review at the end of 3 months, and so on. So it's essentially going to be work for higher mode of skilled resources, skilled people, and the idea is as far as possible there should be minimum amount of turnover. Of course, we accept that there will be a managed level of turnover in this period, but the SK would like to minimize it to the extent possible. Next slide. Yeah, next. Yeah. Okay. So how does the SAFE framework impact? As Snehal mentioned, we have the continuous replanning that happens in the PI, the program increment, which happens roughly every 3 months. So the scope of the work commitment is very clearly known only for the next 3 months. There is a vision and roadmap, that is through the long-term milestones, but it is frozen only at the time of the PI planning, right? So there won't be like a multi-year contract with a very fixed scope, but every 3 months there would be a revision. And also because the SK would be contracting people for their skills and their experience, there would not be a need for a management infrastructure. The management infrastructure would come out of the entire team that has been procured by the SK observatory. Next slide. Yeah, and therefore, in order to achieve this, they would be using the NEC4 professional short services contract. So NEC is a copyrighted set of templates which can be licensed, created by ICE, Institution of Civil Engineers UK. It's a professional body, and the idea was that let us make contracts which are written by engineers for engineers and in simple English, not legalese, right? So you normally would see contracts have a lot of legal jargon. It's very difficult for people to understand. Whereas the NEC proposes contracts which are written in bullet points, simple English, which can be easily understood by a reader in terms of what they mean. And PSSC is one out of those contracts. It stands for Professional Short Services, intended for use for smaller scale projects. Now, of course, SK is a long-term project, but because the actual work planning will be on a 3-monthly basis approximately, we would actually use the PSSC, right? And the link is there, which from where you can get more details. And of course, this is copyrighted, so you have to pay a license fee and download the contract. But I'm next slide, please. I've just extracted a small overview. So just to give you an idea, it's basically what a contract would have, like the main responsibility of the consultant, the time, how quality would be assessed, payment, what payment would be made, at what time will the payment be made in the compensation event, what material to be supplied by the client and what material by the consultant, what are the liabilities and so on, and how to resolve disputes. So everything that you would need in a contract, but as I said, it's usually written in a very simple language. So there is no need to hire a lawyer to look into the contract. Next. Okay, and the reasons why this is useful, of course, is one is that you are mainly talking about the standards, like safe knowledge, experience, and so on, and what is expected. It's for professional services, which is what the SKA software procurement is about, and it can include named individuals. So you can say that this, at least for the duration of the contract, you can say I only want this person, with name so and so to work on this. And of course, we understand turnover takes place, but because the contract is short term, such changes, if they happen, can also be accommodated. And the whole spirit is collaboration and to do the feedback in a way that you can find out ways for improvement, and not as a way of assigning blame to each other. Of course, if there is pathologically poor performance, then that can be escalated and the contract can be terminated. Right? But the whole spirit is to try and make it work. Next slide, please.
Vivek, can you conclude in a minute or so?
Yeah, I think I have the last slide. So all the work will be delivered using the NEC4 PSSCs for software. There could be a framework contract also. If you expect a very similar kind of work to go on for multiple quarters, then you can have the other terms in the contract can be common, and you can have just one page or a couple of paragraphs on what changes in every PI. The risk is carried by the SKAO, and every 3 months this would be issued. Finally, there is also a web-based tool that is provided, which the supplier SKAO and as well as the SKAIC can use in order to manage these contracts. Next. Yeah, I think that was the last slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Snehal and Vivek, for very nicely bringing out the safe methodology and the contracting methodology that SK is going to use. Are there any quick questions? We are running a bit late, but we can handle one or two quick questions before we go to the next talk. So, Vivek, this contracting methodology is mainly for software contracts.
Yeah, so the PSSC will be primarily used for software, and of course, stuff which is similar to software like firmware or maybe even electronic design projects like FPGA and so on. But even for the other type of contracts, SKA does prefer NEC, so not the PSSC. There may be different templates, but they have decided to use NEC as a overarching methodology for other contracts as well. Okay. For the reasons I mentioned, it's written in simple language, and it promotes a spirit of collaboration rather than legal discussions.
Yeah, thank you. Nirupam, are there questions from YouTube?
No, nothing on the YouTube channel.
Okay, so maybe we can move on, because there is some time for discussion at the end.
Yeah, and we can bring this up in the final discussion. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So next.